Dr. George Schwab, professor of Old Testament at Erskine Theological Seminary. When we approach Elijah and Elisha, I try to do the full gamut of how to deal with the text. We look at the Hebrew, we look at the organization of the text, and it, on the surface, is very orderly, but underneath is quite chaotic. Why? At the end of 1 Kings, the very end, last paragraph, Jehoshaphat dies and is succeeded by the next king, and yet 2 Kings 3, there he is again, in a battle, alive and kicking. That kind of thing happens over and over and over again in the Elijah and Elisha narratives. Just when you think somebody's dead, there he is alive again later. So we deal with these issues and the rhetorical strategy of the writer and why he does that. Another thing that we look at is how the text served in its own time when the events happened as the counterpoint or the argument against Baal worship. As you know, Elijah and Elisha were who God raised up to counter Ahab and the Amorites in their promotion of Baal worship. Just like in Exodus, the plagues are swipes against the gods of Egypt, direct swipes like the day of darkness was a swipe against Ra, the sun god. In the same way, the miracles that we see Elijah and Elisha do are swipes against what we know of Baal from the Baal epic that's been discovered in the ancient city of Ugarit. And we look about how the miracles and stories about Elijah and Elisha are calculated to wean the Israelites off of Baal worship, to show, like for example, with the axe head. Baal goes to war with the sea and barely can beat him and finally does succumb to death. But the prophet of Yahweh can just basically order the river to release the axe head, and it does, showing the exceedingly great power of Elisha over Baal. Yahweh doesn't even have to get involved. He just sends his human prophet, who is more powerful than Baal is in Baal's own story. That sort of thing. But we also talk about the Gospels. There are stories about Jesus that seem to be modeled on stories from Elijah and Elisha, where Jesus raises the boy at the city gate. Element for element seems to be following the pattern of what Elijah did and what Elisha did. And we look at the close connection between the Gospels and the Elijah and Elisha narratives. It's closer than you think. One of the assignments I have them do is in the book of Luke, from chapter 4 to chapter 12. All of the connections with Elijah and Elisha, all the references, and there's quite a lot of them. And then we continue on to talk about, to what does it call us? What do we need to give up? What do we need to repent of? What is holding us back from our full Christian witness? And in the end, we also talk about Christ's return and how that sheds light on the Elijah and Elisha narratives and on each story. Because the ultimate meaning of the Elijah and Elisha narratives won't be known until he returns. But we know something about what his return will be like, so we can have that hope infused in the Elijah and Elisha narratives, as well as it convicting us of sin, as well as it promoting the gospel, and so on.